what the committee's purpose is, and anybody that has any great things to say is you're more than welcome to throw them out there. I'll start out real quick and just say that this committee, I hope, will turn out to be a multifaceted type situation where it's directly connected to both Director Murphy and myself are assigned to the T-Stan IRWM group as far as attending the JPA meetings. And at the last board meeting, I was elected for, I don't know, maybe the 4th time in a row or something, to be the chairman of the JPA. So this information will be coming directly to this committee. And what I hope to see is it'll turn into a real great grant finding and money obtaining starting point for TUD, because of all the projects that we need to take care of, and of course the ratepayers do not have the money for that. So there's other things too that I'd like to see this committee do, and we'll touch on some of those in the later agenda items. So I'll pass it over to Director Murphy, see if she has anything she'd like to add.
I think you summed it up nicely.
Okay, great. Anyone else have anything to say, like to add? Okay, with that being said, then let's move to the second agenda item, and that is the Phoenix Lake Restoration and Preservation Project. And guess what I want to dive down into, excuse me. We've heard plenty about what hasn't been done, so I don't think we really need to go there. But what I'd like to do is really discuss or get the discussion going and maybe find some sort of direction that we can then make as a recommendation to bring before the full board as far as grant possibilities and reimbursements in order to get this project done and done properly. So I'll leave it at that and look for input. Director Murphy, do you have anything?
I just have I have questions because I'm still getting up to speed on everything. So I've gone out to Phoenix Lake and walked around. Is it okay with everybody if I just ask some questions about what about the current status of things?
Please do.
Okay,
Please do,
great.
Yeah.
So I went out there, and when you're walking around, there are, to keep the current going in a manner that works for clean water and siltation and stuff like that. There's I don't know another way to say it other than islands or jetties or it looks like some of the dredge material has come up and is now kind of features within the waterway. How does that stuff stay put once the reservoir is full?
Well, Gadiel's also on the line here, and Gadiel was intimately involved in the construction. But yeah, you could call them jetties. We call them berms, water quality control berms. What you see out there now, well, let me back up and say, typically the way they're constructed is with slopes that are stable. Something that's more like a 3-to-1 slope is pretty good. They were track walked in, so they were compacted. Ideally, there'll be some vegetation in the shallower areas that will help stabilize those over time. I know that Mrs. Rhodes had been out there in a kayak and had noticed some erosion occurring. And the reason some of that erosion was occurring was because, unfortunately, the way we had to do construction is we had to dewater the reservoir. And then as you fill the reservoir, you're getting these areas of higher velocity. Once the reservoir was returned to its normal operation, those water quality control berms are essentially going to not see that high velocity. They're going to be either underwater, in which case they're not going to be eroding underwater. But when in the wintertime, when the water level is dropped in the reservoir and then they're exposed, those waterways are wide enough. Our design engineer made sure that there wasn't going to be scour on the edges. But what Ms. Rhodes saw was when we had to fill the reservoir, we had to do some differential filling, and we had one pool that was at a higher elevation than another pool, and it cascaded over, and it did cause some erosion there. But that was a one-time occurrence. And hopefully that's answering your question. It's a combination of slope, material, compaction, and vegetation that should eventually take to those slopes and on the tops of the water quality control berms.
Okay, but in theory, those will be doing so. Like in the winter, when our lake levels are a little bit lower, and then we get a big winter, a flashy big winter storm, and that water comes in, it's set to that water will move through the reservoir in a way that will be different than when you guys did the big input of water?
No, because what will happen is there'll be a continuous path for that water in the winter time through the whole reservoir. What happened during the filling of the reservoir after the dredging process was that we had different areas of the reservoir that were being filled at different rates. Okay. Which is not something that would normally happen. It was an interim period of time in which we were bringing the reservoir back up after it had been fully dewatered. That's not a typical situation. And so we recognized it. Our water master tried his best to pump water into the other pool. So we raised them like this. But if you just have a couple of foot differential, when it breaches over, it's going to be a very short period of time, but that's the erosion that occurred that Mrs. Rhodes saw, and you may have seen some of that as well when you were out there. It really shouldn't occur again unless we have to dewater the reservoir and bring the level back up.
But in the natural cycles, that wouldn't be something that would happen.
Correct.
Okay. So other things that I saw when I was out there, so near where the dam is that an area that's still waiting to be dredged?
Yes.
And that'll be done through the dry dredging process that you are doing, or is that a different process?
We had envisioned, and the board took action on a contract to dredge just a few hundred yards only to facilitate the rehab of the spillway. And that was going to be a messy but dry dredge operation with a long reach excavator sitting on the side, peeling back some of the materials just so we could expose the upstream face of the dam. There is no feasible large-scale dry dredging operation that could be done in that portion of the lake. We feel like that needs to be a hydraulic dredging operation, and Gadiel has prepared some cost estimates to share with the committee on what we think the cost would be to do the wet dredging or hydraulic section dredging for that portion of the lake and the east pool, which I know is of great, interest to some of the people on the call.
And just to, for my edification again, the east pool, is that the area that is also sometimes called the boot? Or is that separate? Well,
the east pool is over near the boot. The boot is actually its own separate management area in the lake, but yes, the east pool is the large area there along Phoenix Lake Park, all the way over to Lakeside Drive. Miss Rhodes has property that adjoins that area, and I think Mr. Schillerstrom does as well. As you can see some of the images in the back there, that would be the east pool. The boot is a little bit complicated because it doesn't have the storage benefit and the water quality benefit, yet it has the wetlands that the Army Corps would have wanted us to mitigate for if we were removing it, and we didn't have the budget for that portion of the project anyway. I don't know if Gadiel has anything to add.
Yes, I would be happy to share my screen here and show everybody exactly what we're talking about when we say the East Pool. So I'm gonna,
Thank you.
where is that?
While Gadiel's getting that keyed up, Eric, a couple of questions real quick. Having owned a rental property along Sullivan Creek and experiencing a very heavy rainfall and the amount of water that goes down Sullivan Creek, will that be able to navigate through the berms without tearing them up? Because I mean, it's a huge amount of water. I mean, it just was, it really astounded me how much water can go down Sullivan Creek during a heavy rainfall. And then my second question would be, if indeed, well, not if indeed, but I certainly hope we can find a way to bring this thing to a positive conclusion. But where will the spoils go if from that wet dredging?
The design engineer ran the flows there in the original Phoenix Lake plan. There was a hydraulic study done, and I can't remember what the peak flow was, winter storm flow was. Certainly many hundreds of cubic feet per second. You're right, Sullivan Creek really gets going. Those water quality control berms, the width and the flow area during a low winter water level, it was designed to accommodate that flow and not scour and not have such high velocity that it would continue to transport sediment into the lake. And that's also why you see the big inlet structure that was grouted with rock, and it was designed in such a way that it would handle a real severe storm event and not basically come unraveled as it gets into the sedimentation basin. Once it drops into the sedimentation basin, it's going to slow down. That coarse grained sediment is going to settle out. And then there's a level spreading weir, and it's not perfectly level, but since it will be underwater, it should be fine. Now, there is rain that falls on those berms, right? A heavy rain, and there will be some of that minor erosion along the banks, at least until vegetation's able to take root. And then the second part of your question, we can get into that in more detail when we get to Gadiel's cost estimate, if that's okay, because it really does address some of those additional questions about where we're going to take this sediment.
Okay, great.
One question is, again, this is Ken Schillerstrom, but with respect to the silt contribution from the boot, how is that going to interface with the silt contribution from Sullivan Creek, or essentially half the lake still silted and left without being addressed at this time, and unknown when it'll be addressed? But my point is that you basically only have a half a lake, and the lake, it works as a whole lake. So I just don't understand how you can not address all the silt contributors at the same time to have the original work even be effective for the long term.
Well, there was a sediment budget done. It's in the Phoenix Lake plan, and the sediment budget and basically looked at what the sources and amounts of sediment contributing to the reservoir were. And Sullivan Creek, I don't have the exact numbers, but Sullivan Creek by far and away was the primary contributor. And that is actually, in fact, the original Phoenix Lake plan only had one sediment capture area proposed, and it was exclusively for Sullivan Creek. It wasn't until we got into the formal design that we moved the sediment forebay down so that it could also capture Chicken Creek. There was never really a sediment forebay or a capture basin envisioned for the boot, partly just because it didn't contribute the volumes of sediment. Now it does contribute sediment, certainly, but I think the idea was a watershed-based approach to control upstream erosion would be possibly more feasible than it would be to build the forebay in the boot itself. But it's going back a few years. I'd have to really study that in order to give you a better answer.
Yeah, maybe I can help with that, Eric. Allow me really quickly to just show you you guys should be able to see my Google Earth image of Phoenix Lake right now. Is that correct? Okay, so this is the old lake. This is before we did the dredging, so let's not be confused about that. But just to show everybody what we're talking about here, we've already brought up the east pool. This is the work area boundary of the contract that we awarded for the east pool. Now everyone knows that we actually couldn't get to this area due to poor soil conditions, but this is, when we're talking about the east pool, this is the area that we're talking about. The boot area is actually over here. If you guys can see my little hand on Google Earth. Can you guys see my little hand on Google Earth?
Yep.
Okay, great. This is what we call the boot. Looks like a boot. Let's see, other areas of interest here. These are the wetlands up here, but here we go. This is the shape of the north pool that we constructed. This is the sediment forebay. All the flow from Sullivan Creek comes in here, and from Chicken Creek comes in here, dumps into the sediment forebay before it goes up and over a berm into this channel over to the west pool, which is right here, and then the central pool, which is right here. And then our water quality control berm is right here. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a picture of that, but that forces the water to flow around. This is what Lisa Murphy was talking about earlier. Water flows around, circulates into the east pool, and then eventually out here to our outlet tower and to the spillway. So just to go over that real briefly, and then again, this sediment forebay with Sullivan Creek and Chicken Creek captures 95% of the watershed that comes into Phoenix Lake. The other 5% is what Kent Schellerstrom was talking about, comes into this area of the lake and flows this direction. So just to get everybody oriented there.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
So can you go back to your picture, Gadiel?
Yes.
Those were very helpful. So down in that area of the East Pool, part of the original Phoenix Lake report talked about the fact that the inflow in that area, sediment-wise, is extremely hard to measure because there are 2 or 3 places where the water's coming under Phoenix Lake Road from culverts on the side of Phoenix Lake Road that unfortunately get a fair amount of erosion sediment, more than it used to, thanks to the PG&E tree clearing that made sense, but created quite a bit of surface that will have a tendency to erode until it has decent vegetation on it. And there's this run-in from the lowlands in sort of from a Dawn Drive ditch that also comes in. So it's extremely hard to quantify it. I agree it's not the majority, but it's still significant enough that the East Pool is incredibly shallow and in no way can facilitate, in my mind, when I stand there looking at it, can facilitate a current flow when you've created this wonderful way it comes in by the berm, and then it's coming into sort of like, you know, sort of a very heavy silt deposit that indeed must slow it down again. And so the East Pool, whether it needs a sedimentation effect up at the tip of the boot can, yes, be a separate discussion, but the East Pool has got profound problems limiting the full benefit of the plan. Thank you.
But building on what Sally was saying, I don't know. I just don't understand why even around where the island is, but if that was dredged in there, you would create greater circulation from, because now it's going to tend to turn around and ignore the east and so I guess what's called south areas.
And
But
Danielle told me the island was supposed to stay as an island.
yeah, I understand, but right now, like you can walk
Oh,
from,
yeah, it's not.
if that isn't deeper, you're not going to have any circulation effect from the east pool into the, I guess, I don't know if that's the south pool over there or what.
Yeah, this is the South Pole.
Well, that's the south
here.
pool. What I'm talking about is in front of the estate homes.
Yeah, the Park Estates.
Oh,
was-
right here.
So yeah, you're bringing the water in and it's not going to circulate because there's already, it's only 1 or 2 feet
Yeah.
deep at its deepest point during the summer.
Mhm.
And my
Um,
concern is water temperature, which you guys have talked about being a function of the depth and the tremendous millweed issue that the whole East Pool suffers from. Used to, over 10 years ago, it was only about 3 weeks of summer, and now it's nearly 3 months that we have to deal with the millweed on the lake, and it affects the aesthetics, but I would think it affects the water quality as well. And again, I just want to emphasize my concern is that once you guys move on from this, we waited almost 19 years to get to this point. Is it going to be another 19 years before any attempt to salvage this lake in its entirety?
And just one sidebar for Gadiel, I thought very specifically early on, when I started talking to you, that island was going to be kept as an island. It was part of the wildlife preservation discussions, and that island, I very specifically called and asked about that island, and you said that island was going to be preserved. So did I misunderstand? I thought it made sense in the water flow pattern,
Well, I
but
do too.
it's not there.
Yeah, let me clarify unless Gadiel, his,
Yeah,
his- go ahead, Gadiel.
Yeah, so the island was always with this construction contract and the design that we have for it and the design that we awarded for it. The island, you can see this blue right here is our construction boundary. This is the island right here where this tree is. So yeah, the island was always going to be preserved during this project. We weren't going to dredge right here. We were going to attempt to dredge right here, and we did attempt to dredge. We attempted very hard. We tried very hard to get to this area, but we, of course, we didn't get to this area. But this was the plan, so that's what I believe in our early conversations that Sally Rhodes is referring to.
But it's no longer an island.
Let me clarify that. Yes, I see the confusion is the blue color that Gadiel has selected here is not indicative or signifying water. It's just signifying where it would be deepened. The island would still be an island in the summer condition. There would still be water around
Winter
condition,
condition, right, Eric?
No, it's a
Right.
peninsula in the winter.
and an island in
Okay.
the summer.
Okay,
But
yeah, I see what you're saying.
If you dredged behind the island, then wouldn't you improve circulation along that whole?
You certainly would, but part of our environmental documents and our geotechnical, our soil sampling was intended to determine where the native ground surface was. And the reason was kind of twofold. One, excavating, the goal was to excavate imported sediment, not to excavate native ground. And then the second part of that was when you get into native ground, that's when you potentially run into, well, more consolidated, harder soils and rock. And we weren't, we weren't set up to deal with that kind of excavation. So I think our soil sampling had concluded that we were getting pretty close to native ground there. And you folks that have lived out near the lake could probably tell us how deep was it? Obviously the island is native ground. That is, you wouldn't want to dig the island. And so as you move away from the island, your native soil, your original ground surface is deepening, but I don't think it was deepening too much. And that's why the blue boundary Gadiel had shown is where we felt like we could get a good bite. We didn't want to skim just to take a foot off or take a two feet off of something, because it wouldn't provide the water quality benefit. You need to get, 3-4 feet of water to get that, those aquatic vegetation to stop growing. And so we felt like, man, if we're going to skim and just take a foot off of this area to get down to the original ground, it's not going to yield the water quality benefit, and it's going to be costly. So that was the rationale there. And I mean, I don't know, Gadiel, if you remember some of the other discussions we have, but that's what I recollect.
No, that was a good summary. Yeah. As far as
The
that decision goes.
vegetation it's 6 to 8 feet, Eric, to stop it, because you have to get the water temperature to drop.
Yeah.
The Phoenix Lake thing report outlined very carefully. It's 6 to 8 feet minimum, or you
We
will
were
not
never
drop
going to get
the
6
temperature
to 8
and kill it.
feet over in that area.
You what?
We weren't going to be able to deepen the lake to 6 to 8 feet on the eastern shore there, because we would have been excavating native soils that weren't part of the original lake depth.
Well, that doesn't make sense when we all know how far we could take boats and canoes in that area 20 years ago, and we can't now.
Yeah,
Are you
but-
referring to the boot area, Sally?
No, I'm not, it's the East Pool.
Gadiel, can you put your exhibit back up?
Yeah, you bet. Screen, you want the. Here's the East Pool.
Can I make a quick request that if you're not speaking, have your microphone on mute? There's periodic feedback coming through.
Mrs. Rhodes, when I look at this and Gadiel's got the control over the cursor, if I were to draw a line from the tree in the middle of the island back towards the shoreline, directly to the south, if you will, my recollection in our soil sediment sampling was that you would not be able to dredge 6 to 8 feet there without basically digging through and past the original lake bed. That the lake was never 6 to 8 feet deep in that area. And as you project out from that island, yes, you will reach a point where the original lake bed did have 6 to 8 feet of water, but you are now in an area where it wasn't yielding a lot of benefit for the dredging. Certainly, if we craft a new project to do this and it's hydraulic dredging, we can add additional scope back in. But what you see is a kayak channel that we intentionally included in here, because we did recognize that folks did need to get access to the lake, especially in the winter. And that was the intent of that a little feature there. But the rest of it, we peeled back just because didn't feel like it was of great benefit. And we knew our budget was already pretty tight.
So I guess what
You're using the word if, so you're clearly stating that it's uncertain whether you're ever even going to.
Mr. Stillerstrom, would you please stop interrupting?
Okay.
If you would, raise your hand and I'll call on you, because that's very impolite. So as I was saying, what I would like to suggest for the committee to do is make a recommendation to the full board with input from both the public as well as from staff. I think what needs to be done in order for us to move forward on this Phoenix Lake situation is to really get our arms around it. And Director Murphy, if you have something to say, I would want you to step up in a minute when I get done here, because you may have some real good ideas too. But I think that I'm very interested in completing all the goals identified for the project. And this thing's been going on for years, and I've been involved in it for years. And where we're at is nowhere close to where it was originally put together. The other thing I'm interested in getting additional grant money to complete this work. I'd like to see us review all of the goals of Phoenix Lake Restoration Project, including review of Chapter 3, the restoration concepts, review Chapter 5, the public access. This is a public benefit, was supposed to be. Review Chapter 6, wildfire management. What is it exactly that still needs to be done? That'll have to come from staff. Make a list of what still needs to be done. And then let's try and put a reasonable, accurate as possible cost to those things. And the advantages for us getting this done now and not allowing it to be pushed off into another day, another time, which may never come. I mean, everything's there now. Let's get it done. So the recommendation that I would like to make, oh, the other thing is too, is that maybe TUD is going to have to hire a coordinator, a grant locator and writer. I don't know, but we certainly don't have that expertise on board now, and we don't get any grants to speak of. They come through from the IRWM, so I think we should really look at that closely. So the recommendation would be to take these things to the full board and develop a draft plan for the next phase to get the Phoenix Lake Restoration Project done. Do you have anything to say, Director Murphy?
I have some questions about the recreation part of it that I know is important to you, Ron, and I know is important to others. And I'm just trying to get a total understanding of what the goal is on that, because I know that the folks who live around the lake probably don't want tons of people pouring in there all the time, recreating on the lake. But I know that there's an interest in access there, and I know that there's, so I'd like to hear a little bit, one, about what the goal is on that, and two, also, what things, when I was out there, and it's back to the erosion stuff, when I was out there of just seeing the some of those berms and stuff, if people were pulling boats out on them and putting things back in, that could end up being a real problem with erosion and stuff. And so I'm just trying to balance the pieces of what are we looking at for recreation, and how will that really affect the residents around the lake, and how will that affect the actual structures that are been built into the lake, and how do we moving forward, just making sure that we don't create a bigger problem, that we're realistic about how we want that recreation piece to be addressed. So on that, maybe from the
No, I'd like to answer that.
side. Oops,
I'd
sorry,
like
go ahead.
to answer that if I could. Director Murphy,
Yeah.
I'd like to answer that if I could.
Great.
When Ted Allen took the information from the Phoenix Lake group and put together the original project to go for the grants. The recreation was not, he had a recreation component in there, but it was not for people to bring their boats and paddle around the lake or anything like that. The object was to have some boardwalks with interpretive signage on it, so that like school classes and everyday people would come in from the west side, and there would be a picnic area over there on that side, and they would be able to enjoy the wildlife firsthand and be able to learn and enjoy the lake off of the boardwalks and that sort of thing. It was never, ever designed to just open up the lake and have people running along the shore, rowing their canoes or rowboats or whatever all around the lake. That was never part of the original plan that he presented. So I hope that clears that up.
Yeah, and where was the goal? Just which part of the lake was the goal to have the like wildlife viewing and boardwalk and picnic?
West side.
Okay.
Would you like me to show the public access chapter in the preservation plan?
Yes,
That'd be okay with everybody? All right, so let's go over to here. So this is chapter 5 that Director Ringen was referring to. And I'd like to just show this great map that they show in here. Okay, so these are the parcels of interest that the plan points out. This is the 2012 plan now, so quite a long time ago. Of course, the yellow is the Apple Valley access parcels. Director Ring, are these the parcels that you're referring to as far as accessing the lake from the west side?
Well, I would like to say yes, but you know, it was kind of vague in the original plan as to exactly how this was going to be done. Like I said, it was the way it was presented to the T. Stan Irwin group when Ted Allen was attempting to get grant to get this project underway. I didn't ever get the impression that people were just going to be allowed to go anywhere they wanted. It was going to be out onto the boardwalks and to the picnic area, period.
Okay. The plan does include more options than that. It includes a boardwalk, and it also includes maybe an access from the south side of the lake, and it does include boat ramps. It does include all of that. So just to point that out, this document is one of the planning. I don't want to. I don't know if it's the only document we have for guidance, but it's certainly a major document that we have for guidance. So if there are aspects that that are more interesting than others, it would be important to make that clear, because there is it does include different types of access, including boat access. So just to point that out. And also, go ahead.
Can you show the other map too with the public access points? I think it's a little clearer for the group. Yeah, that one. Oh, it's just not loading.
Unfortunately, this page isn't working on my PDF right now. Sorry about that, Eric.
No problem.
Yes, Mrs. Rhodes.
I'm sorry to kind of go to a prior area, but two comments. One is in the area of fire and restoration and in public access, one of the things the Phoenix Lake Preservation Plan states at the end is that while they have multiple areas of concern, things have to be prioritized in some fashion because the work can't all be done simultaneously, obviously. And they felt that the dredging was the key priority for starting point. I'd like to ask one question about Gadiel's map with the blue for the east and the work area in the east pool, because there were two south pools. One was called A and one was called B. Can you tell me what dredging was done in either one of those?
Yes, one moment. I have a better exhibit that shows both of those.
Yeah.
Give me one moment to pull it up. Here we go. And back to you guys and share. And here it is. Share. Okay, you guys should see a new exhibit with some colors on it. This is the Phoenix Lake. Let's orient ourselves here. North is pointing over to our right now instead of up like the last map. So here we have east pool that we've been talking about in the pink, the south pool right here. This is area 5B and this is area 5A. And the direct answer to your question is that no dredging was performed in either of these areas. These are the areas that we had set aside for hydraulic dredging, because that we believe that is, well, that's the only way we can come up with to dredge these. So, and if I wanted, there's a few, maybe 100 yards that we did pull out of this area right at the toe of the sediment berm, in order to access more free storage so that we could drain more out of the lake by gravity. So we did do something in here, and it was incidental, a few 100 yards.
Okay, okay. And thank you, that helps a lot. And the second thing is just that when you're talking about a recommendation from the directors to the TUD board, my concern is that if while it's important to outline all the things that haven't been done and figure out how to get them done, I so hope that the unfinished dredging with initial plans and permits can be kept as a top priority thing to push forward. Otherwise, the rest, this undone dredging, I worry will get lost in the replanning of so many other items. Thank you.
Yes, Director Murphy.
Eric, I think that you were gonna, you thought that you could provide some information on, with the existing permits that we have, like would we, because I hear what Sally's saying about the dredging being the most important, and I think that the permits are an important piece of that. And I think you were saying that you would let us know kind of when those expire, and also if there was an opportunity to extend on those.
Yes, Gadiel did some research into the current terms of the permits that were needed to undertake the construction. I'm looking at a table now. I think they can all be extended. They can all be requested for extension, but the current expiration date on the 401 water quality certification is July 12th, 2023. That's the closest expiration. The next one would be the 1600 permit from Fish and Wildlife. That's got an expiration of August of 2024. And then the Army Corps permit, which was so difficult to secure, is scheduled to expire in October 2030. So fortunately, that one is a ways out there. But in the 401 water quality certification, they seem to be very easy to work with. At least the staff people we have been working with are easier than some of the other resource agencies. So I think we can work within the constraints of the existing permits. I understand and respect Mrs. Rhodes' comment that we need to really be careful we don't get lost in too many tasks, and the sediment removal really was highlighted as the key in the plan. Gadiel does have some cost estimates that if the group wants to see those, we can share those. It's totally up to the board.
I think that would be a good thing as background information as we move towards having the committee make a recommendation to discuss this with the entire board so that we can get things moving. Yes, Mr. Shillstrom. You're muted. You're muted.
Okay, just a quick question. So now the work for this summer is what, Power Creek or Chicken Creek? And is that sediment already being addressed with the work that was done last summer? Because there already is a sediment capture area now over on that side, or I guess I'm wondering, is there a way to change priorities? Because it seems like you're going to continue to work only just on that west portion, but still not address any of the sediment issues while we have the lake empty.
To answer the question about Chicken Creek, yes, there is a few, anywhere from 500 to 1,000 yards that'll be pulled out of Chicken Creek this summer. That is, we amended the permit last summer because we just recognized a huge benefit while we have a contractor under contract to be able to get in there and clear out that creek. It wasn't part of the original scope, but it was well understood that it's a need because that creek backs up. It actually floods out it floods out several backyards and also a TUD facility that's back there. So yeah, we are going to dredge a few hundred yards out of Chicken Creek. That's up to the north west side of the lake.
Okay, so we are using funds from the original grants for something that wasn't in the original scope, I guess it's fair to say.
That work was permitted by CEQA and by all of our permits. It was not a part of the original contract that we awarded. We did it as a change order, and we're getting a very high value as far as a per cubic yard basis to pull that sediment out by doing it that way.
Thank you.
Okay, so Gadiel, could you please share with us those costs, please?
Yeah, let me go ahead and hit you guys with the bottom line first. First of all, I did a cost estimate based on bids that we have received. Those are cost estimates based on previous bids are the best way to do cost estimates because it's real contractors that have given real prices. Now, the scope that I did an estimate for is to hydraulically dredge the east pool and the south pool to utilize a temporary dewatering plant upland on the orchards, a temporary dewatering plant system to dry the soil, and then to treat all of the water and put the water back in the lake, and to place the additional sediment on indigenous land. That price, the bottom line, is $8.5 million, closer to $8.6 million. Okay, very high. So I'll go ahead and share the estimate really quick. Now, this has quite a bit of let's see, conditions on the way I did this estimate. First of all, planning level estimate of probable cost for preliminary budgeting purposes. This is a great number to start with if we were to apply for a grant, okay? Second huge point about this, Indigeny has not agreed to accept additional sediment from us, okay? We have not secured that location yet, okay? Again, this is a high level, planning level sort of estimate. We would need to re-engage with Indigeny to have discussions about that. Let's see. Further estimates should be made. Also, this assumes that we can use our current design and our current permits without having to do any further studies or design, which is a plausible thing if it happens within the deadlines of all the permits that we've gone over. Let me think. I thought there was one more thing about this. Let's see. And we're talking about around 267,000 cubic yards as far as the quantity that will be pulled out. And again, that blue area that I showed earlier on the lake, that's this east pool, 60,000 yards was there. And then from area 5A and 5B is the other 207,000 yards that I'm showing on line 8 right here. Now this, as we further define this scope and as we search for grant opportunities and grant restrictions or requirements get placed on it as well, the price could go up. The price could go down. Like I said, it's preliminary. We could adjust the design. We could find a different technology other than the one that I assumed we would use, which is hydraulic dredging. For the record, hydraulic dredging means that there's basically a big hose that sucks out water and soil, pumps it all the way over to your placement area. And then again, I was assuming there are a number of ways to handle that extremely wet material. It's often around 50% water and 50% soil when it's all said and done. You have to take all that muddy water and you can't just dump it back into the lake because of environmental concerns. So I'm assuming that we're going to basically have a small water treatment plant set up on the upland land to handle all that water and place it back in the creek in a responsible way.
Yes, Director Murphy.
Just again, for my understanding is, so if we're talking about hydraulic dredging, right, where we're talking about wet dredging, why is the dewatering needed?
Yeah, I understand that's confusing. We need to, like I said, what I mean by dewater, we don't have to dewater the lake. As a matter of fact, it would be best if the lake was full, completely full at the highest water level. We need to pump you guys together are pumping muddy water, 50% solids, 50% water. You have to dewater that soil that you're pulling out. That's what I mean.
Okay, anybody else with any questions for Gadiel? Yes, Mrs. Rhodes. You're muted.
Sorry, just a quick comment. In the original discussions about sedimentation, there were a variety of alternative sources that are possibly too old to be of value. But I do know that some of the people who live in what's called the lowland, the floodplain, are significantly interested in the possibility of having sediment with compaction because they have grazing areas that tend to flood. That may be a job too awful to embark on, but it's, somebody brought it up. Thank you.
All right, any more questions or comments from anybody for Gadiel?
I have my
All
hand
right.
up. Can I ask a question? I have my hand. You can't see
Well,
it.
I'm sorry, I can't see you because of the charts are, but
Okay.
yes, please.
Just two questions. I guess one is with respect to the indigeny, since you've only removed less than a third, I think, of what was the projected sediment in the original discussion. Wasn't all that sediment supposed to go to indigeny?
Yes, that's an excellent point, Mr. Shellstrom. And we would re-engage indigeny. I don't want to presume that they would be willing to continue to receive sediment because our original agreement is basically finished. We would have to, I believe, we would have to sign a new agreement and could have new terms. And I didn't want to presume that about that private property owner.
Okay. And second question, I guess, so 5 million of the 8 is the South Pool. Now, a portion of the South Pool is going to be done this year. Isn't that correct, over by the dam?
Can you hear me? The amount of sediment that we're pulling out of the South Pool is around the magnitude of 500 yards. The amount that this project had designed was 207,000 yards. So just to put that in perspective.
But the East Pool wouldn't be a big amount of the sediment, it looks like.
60,000 yards.
Yeah.
Depends on who you ask if that's a big amount.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Could I make a
Okay.
comment? Can
Anybody else with a comment or
I,
question?
Leo Lauren, could I make a comment?
Yes, please.
I don't see my picture, but can you hear me?
Yes.
In the original plan, that all of us worked on and it was submitted, there was a dewatering from one side and it was a lot to dry out and be worked on, and then dewatering the other side. Well, in effect, that didn't happen because of the way the work was done. Why can't, since the work is done and you have your flow pattern set up, why can't the south side now be dewatered with a temporary dam put in there, let dry out, and then a more economical method of removing the material applied.
Yeah,
Or-
I completely understand your question. Yeah, and it's a great point. That doing it that way, it was an option for the contractor to do in this project. The contractor chose to do it the way he did it, and we allowed that in the contract. We wanted to give him flexibility. If we were to revisit that, we could certainly revisit that strategy. There are a number of complicating factors to that. One being let's see, just in order to provide the amount of flow to the Sonora water treatment plant, we would have to install some pretty large pumps and some sort of pressurizing system to achieve flows. So yes, a dam, could all this be done? Yes. I mean, if from the perspective that, yeah, we've been to the moon and we could do that. However, we would, of course, when we do this, we would try to choose the most economical and efficient way. Right now, it's looking like hydraulic dredging is that solution. But again, we would, we could approach this from a completely different angle if we wanted to, and if we thought that would be economical.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no more questions or comments for Gadiel or Eric, then I guess I'd like to go back to where I was at. And Director Murphy, when I get through with what I'm recommending for our committee to do, I really want your input, and either yay or nay, so we can move forward with it. Okay, so I guess a recommendation, Melissa, would be take this to the full board, and the items that I mentioned prior would be the subject of that agenda item, and that we recommend, the Watershed Committee recommends that the board directs staff to develop a draft plan for the next phase plan of the Phoenix Lake Restoration Project, and then that could be a full board conversation and discussion, and hopefully we can get this thing rolling forward. And I think I'm going to pick on Michaela before I go to Director Murphy. Michaela Dillon, do you have any information for us with having talked with Lindsay Matos, our administrator from for the T-Stand IRWM? Have either of you been able to locate or see any kind of grant opportunities that might help us out on getting this project going again?
Can I ask a clarifying question? And when you're saying grant opportunities, are you talking about dredging or recreation, or would you like that to be a combined effort?
Well, I think it's probably going to end up being. I mean, I'm no expert at this. I'm just a contractor, home inspector, one of those dumb guys. So this, I would imagine that this is going to take more than one grant, and it's probably going to be separated at least in two, where you're going to have natural resources, recreation component, and then one that will be for the actual dredging work and so on. But I could be wrong. That's the way I worked it out in my head anyways.
I haven't been connecting with Lindsay about future grant opportunities, which is something we can do, but I have been looking into opportunities for recreation that we as TUD could pursue. And then I can start working with Lindsay. I do have a call and a meeting with her this week, and I would love to start this discussion and work with Gadiel on the continued plan.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was hoping that you two were going to be able to get together and get something rolling here, because there's lots of grants out there. And matter of fact, the next item we're going to cover, we're going to get into some of that a little bit. But okay, Lisa Westbrook.
Hi, Director Ringen. There is a potential through IRWM. It looks right now there next funding Proposition 1 funding window is right now set for spring 2022.
Well, that's good to know. So we will definitely try and keep our eyes on that going forward so that we can pursue it best we can. Yes, Steve Sheffield.
Good morning, all. With that last discussion, I feel as your finance director, I just need to bring to this committee and bring to the public as well that, you know, this particular project that was funded by our IRWM, so far TUD has outlaid approximately $5 million in cash. So far, we've received $740,000 in reimbursement. We have not received a reimbursement since 2019. The state has just, everything slowed down with the state, with IRWM, everybody else. Michaela is actively working with contacting the state, working with Lindsay, trying to get some reimbursement. But at this point, it's very difficult. We're really struggling with being able to spend $5 million and not be reimbursed for years and years and years. So I'm very concerned with this situation. I'd be very leery accepting additional grants that do not reimburse us for costs that are outlaid. But again, I just felt that, you know, my responsibility, I brought to the full board at the last board meeting. I'll continue to bring it to us, but until we've recovered reimbursement, we're really in a financial hardship. So just wanted to pass that along.
Yeah, I'll get to you in just a minute, Mr. Schellerstrom. Steve, you know, when we signed up for that grant, at the very front of it, it states, and we signed it, we meaning TUD, it states very clearly that the water board, it may take a while to pay these grants, the funds for the work that's been done. And it stipulates in there that it could be stretched out by quite a distance. And so this is free money. And unfortunately, we have to bleed a little bit maybe in order to get it. If we get hard-nosed and we don't, and because we don't get paid right away, we're not going to get that free money. And it's going to come out of our ratepayers' hide, or the project's just not going to get done. So I think that we need to kind of take a deep breath. I know you have a tough job. You're trying to keep the ship afloat financially. And sometimes I don't know how you do it, but I think that we just need to take a deep breath and try and get whatever we can, even if there's delays in getting the money. And
yeah, Director Ringen, I appreciate your feedback and your perspective on this, but I'll tell you, in my 35 years of experience, I've never had a reimbursement claim go over 2 years. If I'd known up front, there was nothing told. If I'd known up front, we're going to spend $5 million and it'd take 2 years to get it back, I'm not sure we can afford to do that. We're already committed. We already spent the money. I'm taking a breath. I'm being patient, but we do not have another $8 million to front for continued work on this if they're not reimbursing it. So I'm just being fiscally responsible. We're working on the next budget. We've spent a significant portion of our operating cash on this project, and I really don't think it's acceptable to go 2 or 3 years to be reimbursed. That's not what we were told. I understand the delay. I understand that. Some organizations have to go get loans. Well, we've already committed to get some other loans through USDA and everything else. So this is a serious matter. Again, I appreciate your perspective. I'm not trying to be argumentative, defensive. I'm just telling the board what the facts are. And I think it's important for the community to know the facts as well. We're a small organization. Water doesn't have any reserves. Water doesn't have any cash. And we've already spent this money on a great project and got a lot done. But thank you again, Director Ringen, for your perspective, Director Murphy, members of the community. Thank you for allowing me to contribute.
All right, thank you. Mr. Shellerstrom. You're on mute.
Okay. No, I just want to reiterate what you just said. This is money. One, we had these grants awarded many, many years ago. And again, I appreciate the fact that it's a receivable. It's still an asset. And I understand, but to imply that somehow this 5 million is never going to come about is I don't think fair to put on the backs of the ratepayers per se, or play this side of it. It is a slow pay receivable at this point, but it's still an asset on your balance sheet.
Absolutely, but I can't pay payroll and I can't pay accounts payable with an asset that I'm not receiving, and this is money spent out. I'm not incurring or putting this on the backs of the ratepayers.
Well, you did at the original meeting back on the, what was it, the 8th. You implied that it's on the backs of the ratepayers for now. And I found that offensive, actually. But
well, we're spending ratepayers' monies right now for operations when we should have this cash available. I'm not inferring we're going to increase anything because of this. I'm just saying I don't think we can afford to continue going after grants that don't pay us, reimburse us for years.
well,
Thank you for your input.
Okay, Michaela, I saw your hand go up, and then I'll get to you, Mrs. Rhodes.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm at this time, I don't have a comment. If my hand went up, it probably was just my own physical self. Sorry, but I am totally absorbing what everyone's saying. It's really good for me to hear this direction and conversation as I keep my ears open at funding fairs that the district has me attend that are really great. And I grasp so much more hearing the direction of this group, being you and Lisa. And then when we go to the board, it's really valuable for me to hear.
Great. Okay, Mrs. Rhodes.
Just a question to educate me. Is this something that is eligible for a loan if grants are difficult?
That is not something, correct me if I'm wrong, Eric Johnson or Steve, that we've ever looked into. So I don't have an answer at this time.
Well, again, Mrs. Rhodes, when you say a loan, I mean, everything can be a loan. They're going to look at, again, your assets, your revenue, your reserves, private loans versus USDA, some of these other ones. This particular project really didn't qualify for a USDA loan, and we were actively involved with our regional wastewater plant and our Sierra Pines water treatment plants with that as far as getting this loans. The biggest problem we have right now is that the water fund does not have cash. The water fund does not have reserves. The water fund really would be hard pressed to take on additional debt service of $8 million at this point. As Director Ringen said, free grant money is very good in the long term, but again, we still have operating cash needs. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
And was there anything left of what funds were originally allocated for this project?
Part of the funding program in total, they broke it down into several different funding packages, and there was also a local match. So the total after you take out TUD's match, there was not any funds left over. We spent it all on this contract and are awaiting reimbursement for that.
That's a little confusing to me. If you take out the TUD match, that was part of the original grant.
Right.
I realize that you've had to put funds out there waiting for something to be reimbursed, but surely there's a number that says this was the original fund allocation. This is what's been spent. This is what's left.
Yeah. So to put it in perspective, correct me if I'm wrong, Gadiel or Eric, but the total funding, including TUD's match, was 6.4 million.
Right.
Of that, 1.25 was TUD's match. So the remaining 5 million, as of March 4th, we had spent 4.9 million of that. And I believe we've had invoices continue to come in. So we have spent the full amount of the Prop 84 IRWM funding agreements for this project. Make more sense? Eric?
So,
Yeah, maybe,
oh, go ahead.
yeah, maybe we can and also elaborate for Mrs. Rhodes, because I think she's doing some math in her head and she's wondering, is your question how much funding is left that could be applied for construction? Okay.
Yes.
Gadiel, can you answer her question?
Yes, yeah, we do have funds left from our construction budget. And that's kind of a different world than what the budget that Steve is referring to and the way that he looks at the numbers. So we do have, like, for example, the work happening in Chicken Creek, it's extra money we do have that's covered by this grant. Also, most people know, or a lot of people know, we're trying to remove some vegetation in the east pool in order to improve water quality on that side of the lake, as well as we do have funds to help cover that. Yes, we do. I'm going to spend I know that we have this problem with we're not getting reimbursed, but
We lost you.
You froze.
Well, I guess that's the end of that subject.
Rats.
So, Director Murphy, about the recommendation of the committee to the full board, do you agree? Do you have anything to add, subtract?
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to, I think it's a great recommendation. And I think that we need to take into consideration what Steve Sheffield presented, which is that we are awaiting the reimbursement, and to understand that we don't have the, whoa, I think a bunch of people just dropped out. I think all of TUD staff just dropped out.
They did. They
Interesting.
must have something going on there with their internet service.
Yeah. But I think that, taking into consideration what Steve said about that we're waiting for the reimbursement from those grants. And I think that it would be reasonable to say that those grants need to get reimbursed before we move forward, because while you're waiting for the reimbursement grants, you do have to outlay you have to be able to outlay the money ahead of time. And so I totally understand what Steve is saying, which is we need to recoup the money from that last grant period before getting ourselves into another place where we are outlaying a bunch of, another $8 million towards, it looks like everybody just came back on. All right, so, and Steve, this might be of interest to you. So let me just, Ron was asking if I agreed with his recommendation, and I do. But I was saying that I do understand what you're saying, Steve, that we need to have the past grant reimbursed before we could move forward with spending the money ahead of time. And then we need to have a realistic timeline of when we need to understand when that grant will be reimbursed, so that TUD can plan for it, and not just have it be a thing that we're every month hoping that money is coming in to help balance the budget sheets. So I think that, but I think we can step forward with the idea of looking at what we're trying to accomplish, and looking for what grants are coming available. And then I think Michaela, it sounds like, is working on putting the pressure on trying to get those the communication around the reimbursements of the previous grant. Does that sound reasonable?
Are you asking me?
We got disconnected. Could we recap like the last minute and a half? Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I saw all TUD.
All TUD dropped out.
Yeah. So basically, just what I was saying, that I agree with Director Ringen about taking forward this recommendation to the board to look at how we can move forward, and having staff start to investigate what that would look like. And that you are on right now, I believe that you're on trying to get those reimbursements, figure out the timeline for those reimbursements realistically of when those are coming in from the last grant, and and for us to understand what Steve Sheffield is saying, which is we can't just keep putting money out without getting reimbursed or having a timeline for that reimbursement. And so understanding that we can't, TUD can't outlay another $8 million prior to getting that $5 million reimbursed. And then we need to have a realistic understanding for our project timeline of how reimbursement is going to work, so that TUD can financially plan for that time frame between when we spend the money and when we get reimbursed for it. And that within that project, if and I don't know how this works in the TUD land, but if there's a need for a short-term loan to cover the costs on that would need to be incorporated into what we're thinking about when we're talking about the price of that grant. That's not something to be that the interest and the cost of the borrowing the money in the meantime would need to be thought about in that process, and or figured out in the big picture of like how do we do a reimbursement grant, because I think way better to do a reimbursement grant than to try to take this the full brunt of the cost to the TUD water system. But that there is but I totally understand what Steve is saying is we can't just put out millions of, like in the end, the combination of these two things would be what, $12 million, $13 million. We can't have $13 million that TUD has paid without getting reimbursements back in for that. We can't do that extra $8 million. Does that seem reasonable to people?
Okay, so you're good with our committee recommendation then, Director Murphy?
Yeah.
Okay, Melissa, is it more or less clear like mud?
Director Ringen, I know that you had 2 specific chapters that you wanted to include in this committee recommendation. Is that correct?
3.
3, okay.
It's chapter 3, chapter 5, and chapter 6.
Okay, perfect. I have that. Thank you very much.
You bet. And I want to end this agenda item with a comment, and I don't want this thing to go off the rails, but I want to remind everybody, and I've said this, if I said it once, I've said it 10 times over the past several months. TUD has too many oars in the water all at the same time. That's why we have these CSDA loans that what we should be doing. I mean, like I said, I'm a contractor, and I've never seen where I could do 15 jobs all at the same time and have them all come out the way I want them to come out. It's just, you don't have enough money, and you don't have enough time, you don't have enough people. We had no business taking on Sierra Pines until we finished Phoenix Lake. And then, of course, we have this very expensive project, important one, with a regional wastewater plant renovation. That should be completed in its entirety. And then we start moving on to the other ones. But that isn't the way it got done. It's everything all at the same time. Well, of course, we don't have enough money. There's no way. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. Let's move to the next item, which is number 3, and that is the CAL FIRE Fire Prevention Grants Program. And I don't know whether, Melissa, you were able to do anything about that to bring it up or not. Maybe I'll just quickly state that this is a grant opportunity that's out there. I've seen part of it. Once again, this is all above my pay grade. I don't, grants and that sort of stuff is not my deal. But I mean, even though being on the T-Stand IRWM, we're constantly trying to make that happen. I understand about chasing them down, but how you get them, I'm not good at. But it's something that I would like for the full board to have a conversation about and to get familiar with, as well as get either probably Michaela Dillon, because she's already doing it, but Lisa Westbrook involved as far as checking out the CAL FIRE website and grant categories, because there may be components in there that would give us grant money for portions of the next phase of the Phoenix Lake restoration project. So I'll open it up to discussion. Director Murphy, do you have any thoughts on this or whatever?
No, but I see Lisa Westbrook's hand up.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Lisa, I didn't. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Director Ring and Director Murphy. The district has applied for CCI grants before. 2019-20 was the last opening period that the district applied for this type of grant. And they have two CCI grants. One is a forest health grant, which is for extremely large acreage fuel clearing. That's about 1,000 acres or more. And the second grant opportunity, which is the one that the district applied for, is called a Fire Prevention Grant Program. And back in 2019, we applied for a hazardous fuel reduction grant for 9 of our water treatment facilities to do clearance around those. And we did not get the grant application awarded, and neither did about 30 other applications for Tuolumne County. So no funding was given to the county at the time. And the main reason it looked like CAL FIRE at that time was funding most of the projects down in Southern California. So there is potential for us to apply again. And we could do that, but it is mostly related to hazardous fuel reductions. That's the goal of that grant program. And we could reapply with clearing around the water treatment facilities if we want to do so again. And that application period is open and it closes May 19th. So that would be up to the district if we wanted to do that. There is no funding match, which is great for a grant program. You don't have any funding requirement. And that's what I know about that. So I just wanted to give you a little background on that. And if you had any questions.
Yes, Mrs. Rhodes.
So thank you. Is there a possibility that the application could include some of the fire mitigation recommendations in the Phoenix Lake project? Because that is very much about trying to reduce, what was the term you used about?
Hazardous fuels?
Yes. Yeah, because in those marshland areas that are tinderboxes, the concept of channels, they described in the original plan, perimeter channels as well as a central channel to help create fire breaks in heavy areas. So the question is, could that be included in that discussion with the fire grants?
That's a very strong possibility. And the way that CAL FIRE looks at awarding the grant applications, so we can say it would be protecting the main water source for Sonora and Jamestown, and also the residents in the area, and you have to submit a map and the residents that it could impact if a wildfire went through. So that's a very strong chance that we could add that as an element, as a separate component for that grant application.
Thank you.
If I could real briefly just elaborate on that, the fuel breaks, as long as they weren't in the lake itself, those bulrush marshlands that are in the lake are considered wetlands by the Army Corps. And we did try to incorporate a much larger scale clearing because we recognize that the bulrush have taken over that lake and have actually contributed to higher changed the water circulation pattern and high velocities and actually more erosion in certain areas. And we just were unable. So I think we'd have to work with Lisa and really craft a plan that would not implicate the permit process that we already have in place for the lake. Just throwing that out.
Just for information for our public members that are attending today, I'll give you the address, the web address for that CAL FIRE grant thing. It's public information, so you have every right to go on there and check it out. It's www. And then all the rest are lowercase. FIRE.ca.gov/GRANTS. And there's also a video on that website that might be interesting. And I'm sure what Lisa Westbrook, the information that she gave us was all good, but these grant opportunities change, and I think it would be very advantageous if we try to find out what is available coming up and see if we can fit it in to our project. So, Director Murphy, do you have anything to add?
Nope, great conversation. Thank you.
Okay, Melissa, well, first of all, I'll ask, is there any other questions or comments by anybody? And if not, okay, Melissa, so the recommendation would be to the full board to have a discussion that would include possibly Lisa Westbrook and Michaela Dillon. If they could become familiar with the CAL FIRE website and grant categories and opportunities. And then maybe have that come back to the next IRWM Community Watershed Committee and discuss funding opportunities for the Phoenix Lake restoration next phase. And also possible nature-based fire resiliency projects for Tuolumne County.
Melissa, it's called the Forest Legacy Program for CAL FIRE, the one that would include an element of recreation.
Thank you for that, Michaela. Okay, if I've got agreement from Director Murphy, okay, I've got a thumbs up, so I guess that's it, Melissa, for that. So we'll move to number 4. This one's interesting. This was sent out to the full board. Melissa sent it out, I don't know, a couple, 3 months ago, something like that. And it's the Paradise Nature-Based Fire Resilience Project document. And this is it here. And it's 25 pages long. And when I first got this, I'm going, what in the world is this all about? But I forced myself to read it. And this is powerful, really powerful, what they've done. And they brought in a couple groups from Oregon down to the Paradise area and put together, well, one of them was a Conservation Biology Institute, the Nature Conservancy, and then they joined up with the Paradise Recreation and Park District. And what they did is they came up with this plan, and it's actually been instituted. And it's to make sure that something like what happened before, the big fire, does not happen again, and that they basically heal the land and so on, while their fire protection thing is going on. And I can't get into this, it's too involved, but if there's a way, maybe Melissa could put a link to this report so that people, if they're interested in it, can go ahead and read through it and see what I'm talking about, or what they're talking about. I'm not talking about it. And because I think it's something that we should really seriously look at here in the county. And this may, if we were to institute something along the same line, this may help us immensely on trying to put together that needs assessment that is way behind being done for the water that we need out of New Maloney's that we're trying to get. So I saw Director Murphy's hand go up. What do you have to add?
Just that everybody has access to it. It was part of the agenda.
Oh, it was in there? Okay, I missed that. Okay, good. So is there any comments or questions or anything? Okay. Well, then here would be what I would suggest. This would be the recommendation of our committee to the full board, that we recommend to staff as the next step to contact and develop more information, research on with the Paradise Recreation and Park District and the Conservation and Biology Institute to get an idea of the cost, and then report back to the IRWM Community Watershed Committee at the next committee meeting as to what the information is found out to be. And then maybe we can move this thing forward if everybody's in agreement. What, do you have anything to say, Director Murphy?
I'd just like a little more clarification on that. I don't exactly understand what we're asking the staff to do.
To contact and develop more information concerning that document as it relates, let's say, to our county, and then our TUD service area and so on, and then to get an idea of the cost to, if we were to implement those two groups to basically do what they did for the Paradise area for Snohomish County. And Lisa Westbrook, yes.
Yes, Director Ring, I'm curious to know if this report, because it was very good, I did read it, if it was forwarded to the county, because the county is right now organizing a wildfire prevention group made up of county officials and also the public to look at such things just as that report is listed. So I was just wondering if you've had a chance to reach out to the county and ask them that, what their participation would be.
No, I have not, but I agree, and that's why this is sort of an urgency thing, because I could see where this would fit in with what they're trying to do. And they're also putting together a fire committee, which I need another meeting like I need a hole in the head, but I did apply for. Yeah, I agree that but this goes back to the same old thing, that the county and TUD need to start meeting and working together on these things, because they're all interrelated in one way or another. It all comes back to water, it all comes back to land planning and things like that. Yes, Director Murphy.
I am a little inclined to change the direction slightly of the recommendation, because I agree with what Lisa Westbrook just said, and I think you do too, Ron, that it's a big county-wide thing, and that maybe the proper first step would be to connect with, and I don't know if that's, if Lisa, this would be under your purview, but to I don't know if it's reach out to the Board of Supervisors, or if this is all kind of coming together under the Natural Resource Committee, or who it's coming through. But I think this is bigger than TUD on this one. And rather than everybody chasing down information separately, that might be something that would be good to come together on. And I don't know, we had that the kind of watershed meeting. We've had one joint meeting with City Council and the Tuolumne Board of Supervisors that I think everybody felt really positive coming out of. And I don't know if that's if addressing the nature-based fire resiliency for Tuolumne County, if that would be another thing to have a big group meeting on, or if it would be more useful just to have Lisa Westbrook reach out to the Board of Supervisors, or I don't know, I don't know the proper functions of this, but it seems like get everybody on the same page first and then move forward as a county rather than TUD trying to take this on. Does that resonate with you at all, Ron? Does that make sense?
It does, except that I want to go back to the original basic recommendation, because if we just throw it out on the table without the background information, like if these people are even willing to come down here and what the cost would be if they are willing, we're going to get the same old story we always get from the county. Man, we don't have any money. And that's not going to help us. I mean, if we already know they're agreeable to come do this and what the parameters would be on how they would go about it, and we know what the costs would be, then I say, yes, let's get them and everybody else involved and move the thing forward, because then it's a good possibility. Until we have that information, it may not ever be. They may say, no thanks, we don't want to be involved.
I guess the piece where we talked about TUD having so many irons in the fire, and things getting sort of staff time getting stretched and things like that. And that's just the only concern I have on this, is that it does really feel like it's a countywide thing that we need to, like if we were applying for it, as we would need to be doing that as a county, not as the water resource, I would think. And looking for grants from that side of things. So I just, that's my concern on this. Lisa Westbrook, what, in your capacity, what would you be able to do as far as reaching out and working with the county to get this sort of thing rolling, so it's not just on the back of TUD?
Well, I would reach out to the people that are spearheading that fire prevention agency. That's a kind of a subcommittee, just like we have our own committees, through the County Board of Supervisors, and tell them our intent and interest in that plan, and share that plan if they haven't read it already. But I think that would be a good first stepping point to see if they've even seen it yet, and if they're interested in collaborating with us as a county-wide project. And then we have to also take in part that most of the lands are part of the Forest Service, so they would probably need to be involved with that conversation as well.
So Director Murphy, I think that the committee, I don't think has the ability to direct Lisa Westbrook to do anything along that line. I think it needs to go for discussion with a full board and have the full board decide on exactly how, who, what, and when. And that's what I was trying to say with this recommendation.
Okay, and so I'm just clarifying on what we're recommending for the board to look at. And so from my perspective, I would like to see the recommendation be a bigger recommendation of that it is linking with rather than having TUD do the work independently of starting that link to look at it as a county, would be the direction that I would be more comfortable requesting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. And that is part of what I'm trying to say would be in the discussion, because then Director Murphy would bring that subject up, and then all the rest of the board members could talk back and forth and figure out the proper direction to go, which probably will be including the county or making the county be the head person. But I just wanted to try and see if we couldn't get some advance information before we went to the county so that we knew it was even possible. Because we don't know whether those groups are going to allow themselves to come down and do this, number one, and we don't even know what the cost would be.
Do we know that we need those groups to be involved?
Well, they were awful successful up there in Paradise.
Correct. Yeah. And I'm just wondering if we could use the example of that and create, like, I don't want to limit us to, I don't want to limit us to needing to utilize the same groups. If they've shown and published kind of what they did, it might be possible to work from that and figure out how to apply that here, even if the design firm wasn't available. I think it was a design firm, wasn't available.
So all that would be part of the conversation.
Discussion.
Yeah.
Cool.
So is that clear as mud, Melissa?
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
So you want this item to come back to the board for discussion and recommendation, and we're not proceeding with getting additional information, is that correct?
Well, not until the board okays it.
Okay, so basically it's
maybe
just,
the rest of maybe the rest of the board is going to say, you guys are nuts. There's no way we want to get involved in anything like that.
okay, so it's just the committee recommends that it brought before the full board for continued discussion.
Correct.
Okay.
And of the document itself and the plan and, just whatever comes up that interests or is on the top of the board members' minds so that we get it right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Ron, do you feel like there's any information that needs to be excavated prior to that meeting?
Well, I mean, I'd like to know a whole bunch of things, but I really don't have the authority to do so because I'm only one of 5.
Okay. Just checking.
Yeah, it needs to go before the full board so that we know we've got at least a majority that feels that this would be a good avenue to go down. So anyway.
Good.
All right, with that, unless somebody has something further to add, no questions, nothing more to add. Well, then I want to wish everybody a really great rest of the day and enjoy the sunshine. And I guess we'll close this committee meeting. Thank you.